Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Story. I am Daniel Parker, and as you can see, different setting this time, although still not in my house yet. Uh, but I'm going to be in here for a couple of weeks. But the internet's good; everything is set up, so no issues there.
The
But
paintings are definitely more abstract.
yes, they are. Yeah, it's very interesting artwork there. But yeah, and I have to sleep right underneath them. Um, but um, but yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I am the writer creator of Angels Awakening, which is a little comic book that I wrote, and now it is in fulfillment as we speak. I know a lot of people are getting their books, which is great. Hearing some positive feedback from those who have read it, so which is also great. Want to thank everybody again who've for backing this book, for putting your faith and trust in me, and I know you won't be disappointed with Angels Awakening, and it's that's just the beginning. I've got another book in the works, the next issue, and yeah, it's great times right now.
I've seen the cover and it looks cool. I haven't gotten mine yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, of course, joining me is my partner in crime here, DB Fastbinder,
Hello, everyone. Uh,
and sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say. Meanwhile, where Daniel's in fulfillment, I'm in pre-shill, so I have a couple of things to show off here.
Yeah.
So first off, this week my Kindle short story Second Contact is going to be just completely free. Just so if you're watching, go ahead and grab it. Doesn't cost anything. Also free is Saga of the Storm Wizard. Yes, the spin-off Magpie Wizard novel that I've been working on since July is finally coming out for general consumption. It's been up for patrons and been slowly putting it onto my subreddit for a while, but now it's just up and ready.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna be a really cool book. And of course, if you're like me and you really like Rose, you'll definitely gonna want to pick up a copy of this once it goes up for sale.
Yep. Although I will warn you that that's the most we see of her. We're not gonna. This is a
Yeah.
classy book, despite a few things that happen in the book. It presents itself as classy.
Yes. So not quite buy my book, but get my book, I guess. Read my book.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm not gonna play it.
Uh, oh, good. And then I'm fighting this right now to. There we go.
Yeah.
Then we have one more thing here, which is a preliminary Kindle cover for book 3.
Yeah.
Now, I made a couple of minor requests. When I had asked for this kind of ghostly figure to be at the top of the stairs, I had thought that that implied the removal of the Cthulhu tentacles, which they look cool, but that's not in the book, so I don't want to mislead people.
Yeah. Ooh, a story set in Japan and with tentacles.
Yeah, let's avoid that connotation, shall we?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun finding. Like, I really love how this turned out here.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
because what that was originally just a guy being surrounded by money, but it's actually a character named Haru who is able to command insects. So like it kind of does a good job of pretending to be an insect swarm.
Yeah.
And now I've got picture in picture again, so I'll go ahead and okay, the good.
All right. All right. So for this stream, this was something that I came up with, and so for those of you who are probably new to watching us, whenever there's like a major topic going on the internet or in the news or whatever, uh, Bobcat and I won't necessarily we'll talk about the topic, but we'll usually talk about it in a much broader sense rather than just talking about that specific topic, because A, everybody else is talking about it ad nauseum, and B, we kind of want to offer a different perspective on things.
The SJWs are in your breakfast cereal. The
Yeah.
alt the alt right is I don't know, trying to take over knitting.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, we don't want to be one of those channels.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. We want to be a little more we want to be more fun, and we want to be a little, more um cultured, I guess.
Also, hail creators outlet.
Yes. Hey, good to see you. Yeah, good to see you, man. So uh the the topic is mainly revolves around with Dune and Marvel Cinematic Universe fans. And for those of you who probably didn't see it, a lot of Marvel's MCU, a lot of the MCU fans were really upset about Dune not having any humor in it. And as someone who is, and full disclosure, I haven't read the books, but I've seen the David Lynch movie, and I saw the two Sci-Fi Channel miniseries that they did based on Dune and then Children of Dune, 15, 20 years ago. So I know a little bit about the lore of of the universe. Not a lot, but a little bit, at least enough for me to enjoy the story. And what really bothered me about all of that is that Dune wasn't meant to have humor. Like it's not a fun, happy-go-lucky comic book story. It's a very dark, very dense story. I mean, it's got politics, it's got religion, it's got environmentalism, it's got you know family dynamics and all that sort of thing. It's not meant to be just a fun, fun popcorn movie. It's meant to kind of be a little more meant to be more thought provoking than your average film, especially your average MCU movie. So when I started seeing that, and I'm like seeing that, oh, there's no humor in this. Well, the original novel didn't have any humor in it, as far as I know. I don't think Frank Herbert, the author, I don't think he didn't intend for it to be that way. And so every subsequent adaptation of that story means that wasn't going to have any humor in him either. I mean, that's just the way it is, and you basically have to take a story like that for what it is and not necessarily what you want it to be.
Yeah, like the only thing I could think of that's kind of funny from what I've seen of Dune is Baron Harkonnen in the Lynch movie, just because he was like comedically fat and ridiculous and opulent looking in his little floating chair thingy.
Yeah, yeah, and he had all the lesions on his face and everything, which was it was actually quite controversial when the movie came out, because of it was meant, they thought it was a reference to like the AIDS HIV epidemic, which was going on back then.
Ugh.
Yeah, and yeah, so but the other thing too about Harkonnen, Baron Harkonnen, that a lot of people they didn't. Okay, it's mild spoiler. I'll try not to give away too many spoilers, but Harkonnen likes them young.
Yeah, that's what I seem to recall. I haven't
Yeah.
seen the movie myself, but I've seen some reviews, and that was always like a highlight was like Baron Harkonnen just puffing around on his floating vest thingy.
Yeah, and I will say, Dave Batista was really he's really terrifying as Raban, the nephew of the
Hmm.
Baron. Yeah, but yeah, but that's the way the Dune story is. It's there's a lot of I'm going to say mild spoiler. A lot of bad stuff happens to the main characters. Like it, just a lot of really awful stuff happens to them, and it's you know, it, and I wish I could tell you that it gets better, but it doesn't. And there's actually one thing that happens later on, and I don't know if they're going to do it in the movie. They did it in the miniseries. Um, uh, yeah, Chingus. We're talking about Dune. Uh, but okay, infanticide.
Right. So not a happy-go-lucky story. In fact,
No,
humor would be completely out of place.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's and so when you have a story like that, it's important to kind of keep that in mind. When if you're reading a story or you're watching a movie or a TV show or a comic book or reading a comic book, it is kind of important to keep in mind the original the author, the creator's vision for how they wanted that story. Sorry, acid reflux. What they wanted that story to, how they wanted the story to be told.
Yep, and I think that's something that I've noticed in myself occasionally is, you're watching a movie and it's like, oh man, you had this other story you could have been telling, and in your mind it's like, oh man, that's much more interesting than what I'm actually seeing because of course you came up with it, so it's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
So there can stand to be a little bit of audience humility. I
Hmm.
think there's also a level where, and this is like a thing with a lot of Disney movies, is the unwillingness to go really dark without constantly throwing a joke in every 5 minutes or even 2 minutes.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
Last Jedi had a lot of weird, humorous moments, like that were kind of interesting, like visually, like transitioning from the descending spaceship to the iron in the ironing place on the warship. Just like lot of things like that, okay, so we just had a big explosion in the hangar and all the ships are destroyed, but we're throwing BB-8 against the wall and making a wow funny noise.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we take this situation seriously or not? Though the worst, to avoid bringing up the Last Jedi for the billionth time in this podcast, let's talk about an example that Daniel brought up: Thor Ragnarok. Uh, so the original the comic book series that was based on was literally an adaptation of the death of the Norse gods. It took place during the Civil War timeline, which kind of lines up with how they did it in the MCU. But it was like a serious adaptation of it, and everybody had lesser hammers, and it was them against the frost giants. And they were eventually all wiped out, so Thor was just gone for years.
Hmm.
Which is why, I mean, actually no, maybe no, it happened during Disassembled. That's right. And then they had the weird clone Thor, Clor, where they call him, show up to fight on Tony Stark's side in the Civil
In
War.
Civil War, yeah.
That's right. So Thor was, they stuck to that character death for what, at least 3 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Which you got to respect him for doing that. But uh, then you have, but it's like, it's a dark story, characters that you've loved for decades dying left and right, massive destruction across the 9 realms. For the movie adaptation, what's that meme guy everybody likes, the one from Jurassic Park? Let's make him the villain.
Yeah.
And you know how in the movie Ping Pong, Christopher Walken was basically playing the meme parody of himself? Let's have him do that. His name is just completely escaping my mind right now. The guy who was the villain in Ragnarok.
Oh, you talking about Jeff Goldblum?
Jeff Goldblum. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's have Jeff Goldblum, and gosh darn it, we paid for Jeff Goldblum. He's going to 130% Jeff Goldblum in every single scene.
And he did.
And we're going to have constant jokes, and and at the end of the movie, it's like, that was a good, funny time. And then you realize, wait a minute, that was a story about the destruction of Asgard. Thor's home is gone, and lots of people are dead.
Yeah.
Well, why did I come away from the movie feeling happy? Because joke, 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 joke.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, even as Asgard's blowing up, joke, joke, joke.
Yeah, there's actually a term for that. So you've heard of pathos, where it's like a moment of extreme like tragedy.
Hmm.
There's a opposite term called bathos, which is basically improper humor that derails the scene.
Yeah,
And I feel like the Disney, yeah, excuse me, it can be related to that, but it's an effect of anticlimax created by an unintentional lapse in mood from the sublime to the trivial or ridiculous. So, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't actually.
oh, so that's I should have told you I was sharing the
No,
screen. That's right.
okay, but so yeah, so basically, you know, you have the Hulk who's been the whole, or Banner the whole movie. It's like, don't worry, I can turn into the Hulk. And it's like he's going off to for a big heroic thing, face plant.
Yeah, God. Yeah, yeah,
To dip back into the Last Jedi for a second, Luke gets the lightsaber that Rey was offering him at the end of the last movie, tosses it over his shoulder, which the which
yeah.
to bring it back to it, now there's clearly an audience for that type of thing.
Hmm.
Both of the movies that we're talking about that had this bathos problem made probably $2 billion between them easily.
Hmm.
Actually, probably like 2 point. I think they both made about 1.3 billion, as memory serves. Uh,
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, yeah. I think Last Jedi did like about 1 point. It's somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5 billion, and then Thor Ragnarok, I think did close to a billion. So
yeah, so 2 to 2.5 billion. So clearly, there were people who really like who enjoy that style, but it
mhm.
isn't suitable for everything. Arguably, it isn't even suitable for the movies that it came from.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it definitely isn't. It isn't definitely isn't the flavor you need for every single story.
yeah. And I will say too, like, and to go to another franchise that I grew up loving, Star Trek, which I talked about Star Trek all the time. Um, and in particular, Star Trek First Contact. You look at that movie. That movie was a very dark story. I mean, that movie had a lot of dark elements in it, but it also had some humor in there as well. And it worked there because the humor didn't derail the the rest of the movie. I mean, the scene where by the way, this scene cracks my mother up every single time she sees it. But it's when uh, Counselor Troy's in the bar getting sloshed with Zephram Cochrane, and and then she just passes out drunk, and that scene works because it's because the situation in there. But at the same time, it doesn't derail what's happening in the movie, and part of the reason they have that scene in there is because you see the character of Zephram Cochrane being just an absolute drunk, and that's
Mhm.
to set him up, because everybody all the characters in the movie are like, oh, Zephram Cochrane, he's this brilliant man,
Yeah,
he's great.
he was the first guy to do, or first human to do subwarp travel.
Right, yeah, and then they see him and he's like, oh, he's just a drunk,
Yeah, it'd be like going in time. Oh, I'm going to meet Orville and
and Wilbur, right, yeah.
yeah, Wilbur and Orville, and then you find out that they were, I don't know, dealing dope on the side or something. Like, what?
Huh? Yeah, yeah, or I if I went back in time and met Martin Luther and like, oh, oh, that's right, he had some anti-Semitic tendencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, to get back to the topic,
Wait, are you
uh,
Lutheran too?
I went to a Lutheran college.
Okay, uh,
Yeah,
that would be a heck of a coincidence. Anyway,
yeah,
but so yeah, so it's like you can have your moments of comedic relief. They just can't derail the story itself.
right, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
imagine if they're in excuse me, first contact, second contact is my book. First contact, you're having, they're fighting the Borg in their last desperate attempts to stop them from preventing this first historic flight. And that's when Counselor Troy passes out drunk in a bar somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, it would just like, what are you doing here? Yeah, and if you think about like going back to Dune, like you know, there really isn't any place for there to be any great humor in there anyway. I mean, um, when like the one joke in the whole movie, and I guess I could tell the joke now. It's with I can't remember the actor's name who plays Paul Atreides, but he's talking to Duncan Idaho, who was played by Jason Momoa, and if for those of you who don't know the story, Paul and Duncan are kind of like they. Duncan's kind of like an older brother to Paul, and so Duncan makes a joke to Paul like, oh, he said, oh, you looking good, you look putting on some muscle, and Paul's like, oh, really? And Duncan's like, no. That that trademark Momoa sarcasm, like, no.
That deadpan.
Yeah, yeah. uh but yeah, that's the sole joke in the movie, and take it or leave it. That's all you're gonna get. Especially
Right.
in a story like that.
Now, and it occurred to me when I was thinking about this, there's also a difference between expectations in an existing franchise versus a brand new story.
Hmm.
Like, for example, this is another, man, I'm just talking about free stuff today. Well, if you have an Audible membership, there's a short, I thought it was an audiobook. It's really more of a old-timey radio show called Zeta House, or the Zeta House. It was something my dad recommended to me, and I'm about the Zeta family. About 2/3 of the way in, and I almost gave up at the 15-minute mark because so that sort of office style of characterization, or like Parks and Recreation, where everybody's just ridiculously incompetent at what they do, and they're all awful and self-absorbed, and just it's a comedy about miserable people being miserable.
Yeah.
That's what that is. It's basically about a young woman who's a freelance reporter who tries to investigate this cult compound, and she discovers as she goes that it's very The Man Who Would Be Thursday by G.K. Chesterton, where it seems like everybody who's in there is a documentarian, an FBI agent, Canadian agents. And at this mark in the story, I'm thinking, is there anybody who actually believes in the cult who's in the cult? But I almost gave up on it because that's a style of comedy that's gotten very grating for me over the years. Because you eventually get kind of it's, how to put it, it's like that very sort of ironic voice where it's like, haha, we're writing about how we don't actually have a joke here, or how we're not actually good at something. Like they have this narrator who sounds, I don't know who she is, but she kind of sounds like the robot from Spaceballs. That's sort of like Jewish stereotype older woman.
Oh, Joan Rivers.
Yeah,
Joan Rivers. Yeah.
Sounds like somebody doing a Joan Rivers impression.
Okay.
And like every chapter, like it's like she's there just to say what day it is, and the time. But that's just her role at the start of every chapter. And you would think that, okay, day 5, but like it's like, oh god, where am I? Why don't they make a breakfast drink with anything besides vodka? That's terrible first thing in the morning, don't you know? And it got such gas, and and is it day 5, day 6? I don't know. And it's actually kind of funny when you get away from yourself, and that's why I kind of realized that, okay, pause. This is not a story about competent people doing competent things.
Yeah.
Readjusting my expectations.
Yeah.
Let's try this again. And while it occasionally gets obnoxious, like it's kind of characters saying some subtext things that should just be subtext and not outright said,
Hmm.
Like kind of like say there's this woman at the Canadian Intelligence who's like, "Boy, you sure are, boy, you sure are kind of biting my head off there." And she's like, "Well, look, I'm in a male-dominated field, so I have to be very aggressive to keep up." It's like, okay, that's like kind of on the nose. Thanks for explaining your character. Or like, you know, uh, like, oh, that's your implicit bias talking. You're just like that. Okay, okay, that doesn't really add. That isn't a joke per se.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the lesson is like, again, take it for what it is and not what you want it to be. It's like, okay, yeah, it's okay, yeah.
Yep,
This is a show with a bunch of people who are really competent and just kind of go with it. Yeah.
yep. And that's how I've enjoyed it. Is just readjusting my expectations. Now it's very different if you have an existing franchises. If the Zeta family was originally a serious sci-fi novel written in the 60s, and this was the adaptation, and this was the adaptation of it as a bunch of incompetents out there doing incompetent things, then you fans of the original would have a right to be kind of unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah, and they would be saying, "What? This isn't Dune. It's a parody of Dune." Yeah, it's
In fact, you'd kind of have Star Trek Lower Decks at that point if you
yeah.
turned Dune into that.
Oh god, yeah. And it wouldn't work. Just like Lower Decks doesn't work.
Right. Now, I will say that it's also kind of interesting how you get a mood around a franchise. Like, let's say that I'm just going to speak hypothetically here. Let's say that in the 2000s, the creators of South Park had been tapped by the makers of Star Trek to make a one season Star Trek parody along the lines of Lower Decks. And like this, let's say this had come out in 2002 or so.
Mhm.
So 2002, it was the Voyager era. So, not all Star Trek fans were happy, but I would say that Voyager was more popular than it wasn't just talking with people over the years.
Mhm. And you also had Enterprise, which when that show was on, very few people liked it.
Right. Uh, maybe 2002 is okay. You know what? We'll kick it back. 1998.
Mm.
That was like a good time because I think that would have been when
It
when
was
Deep Space
DS,
Nine would
yeah,
have been ramping
DS9,
up.
yeah, DS9 Voyager, and then I think that was the year Insurrection came out.
Right. So maybe not
Yeah.
the best year in Star Trek history, but it would have been a decent year.
Hmm.
So like, I mean, imagine like they, instead of Futurama, Matt Groening and David X. Cohen had made a Star Trek spinoff, as ridiculous as Lower Decks. I think that the mood around the franchise would have been more conducive to that sort of self-referential parody.
Hmm.
Like, it wouldn't have felt like kicking the series while it was down, like Lower Decks does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I want to say it was either 98 or 99 was when Galaxy Quest came out.
Yeah, it's another one, and I used to
Yeah.
troll people by saying it was my favorite Star Trek movie. It might still be my favorite Star Trek movie, but I've seen more of them since then.
Well, that was Roberto Orz was either Roberto Orsi or Alex Kurtzman, one of the two. They said that was their favorite Star Trek movie was Galaxy Quest.
Oh no!
Yeah.
And now they're in charge of actual Star Trek. Okay,
Yeah.
that explains a lot.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah, so like there's a time for every kind of story, and there's room for it under the sun. But you also have to consider: is this its own thing? Is it going into a beloved franchise? What kind of state is that beloved franchise in?
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and yeah, and to go back to Dune, I mean, it's Dune is as I said before, it's a very dense story, and it's very hard to tell on screen. Um, and that's why I give a lot of credit to Denis Villeneuve for doing it how he's doing it, because he's splitting it into at least two, maybe three movies, and it's there are people who love the story. They love the it despite what some people might think, the David Lynch movie does have its fans. There are some people who like that movie, whether it's because they like Dune or whether it's because they like David Lynch. Um, and then the miniseries, for as flawed as it was, like if you go back and watch that miniseries, it will look extremely dated with the effects, and it was definitely made on a very, very tight budget. Um, but I mean, that franchise is it kind of been, I would say the fans of that franchise have been waiting for something like this for a long time. At least, you know, probably about 60 years, since the first book came out.
All right, so
And
just like a straight adaptation like this.
yeah, exactly. And so so for people to a modern audience to come in and say, we want more jokes, it's not funny, there's no humor.
The sad things are happening. It makes me sad.
Yeah, yeah. Like, it's a sad story. Like,
You
you know,
you don't go to the Notebook and say, "Where's the car chases?"
yeah, exactly.
You don't watch Rambo 3 and go, "Where's the sappy romance?"
You don't watch Titanic and like, where are the aliens?
There was Thumbtanic where they had a giant spider attack at one point, so I guess that's as close as they got.
Yeah. Yeah, or watching Indiana Jones. Where are the aliens? Oh wait.
What are you talking about? They've never made more than 3 Indiana Jones movie, and there definitely isn't an upcoming Indiana Jones movie where they're going to erase him from history.
Yes, exactly.
So, so let's kind of go back to how does this ever happen to you? Because I feel like a lot of my stories come out of this kind of instinct, which is basically you're watching a movie or a TV show, and you go, "Huh, this little element off to the side is way more interesting than the main plot."
Hmm. Yes, that's happened to me on a number of occasions. Yeah.
Now, does that mean that the base story is inherently bad? No, not necessarily. It could just be that it appeals to me for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, in fact, that's kind of like where my Magpie Wizard books come from. Was me noticing. Well, I think I've talked about this before, but before isekai was the big thing in light novels in Japan, the big thing was, what if Harry Potter but more sexy? Like what if I was at some sort of like military magic school? It's got to have a military aspect because otherwise, why would we have a whole school dedicated to just magic? And plus, it gives us some enemies.
Hmm.
Um, But there was one guy and a whole bunch of babes who were totally into him. Like like there were about 5 or 6 series that I'm aware of that fit that general description. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
isekai kind of stomped that out, but it was like I watched 5 or 6 of them. I noticed, it's always the most normal girl who ends up being the romantic interest for the hero.
Hmm.
It's just like, it's never the weird childhood friend. It's never the older ara girl. It's never the sporty one. It's always just like the most generic girl that I think like every Japanese teen would want to bring home to mother.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went, you never, like, you guys keep telling these stories where it's just always the most boring girl possible who's just like a generic tsundere who ends up with the main character. I want to explore. I want to explore those side characters and what they would be like. They actually got some focus.
Yeah.
It's like that's a productive use of it. You know what an unproductive use of that would be?
Hmm.
Um, Sending death threats to the makers of Voltron if they don't make my exact ship happen and focus on the plot the way I want it to be focused on.
Oh man,
Like,
yeah.
uh,
That's,
so it's like those are like almost that's like a similar starting emotion,
mhm.
but it definitely can go horribly awry.
Yeah, 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 and and with my with my story, it was basically just like I really wanted to have just this go back to the days of the really cool hot spy chick, and just to kind of give it like to give it that sort of superhero twist to it, and and in the case of Jessica, having her being able to teleport everywhere, and then I thought that that was just a cool way for her to like sneak around, sneak around and stuff, and and I don't know where I the idea came from. I guess it was just kind of like from watching, like when I'd see like like a spy or a thief sneaking into someplace, and I kind of went, what if they just kind of like could just be there and not have to like do rope stuff for fancy
Pick the locks and
pick the lock, yeah, or the wire stuff like Tom Cruise,
mhm,
just just kind of something like that. And now
yeah,
that
to the point.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. So yeah.
And just another example of the instinct we're talking about here. But what if somebody said, "Well, Jessica's boring. The main character is clearly this water elemental woman, and her struggles dealing with a male-dominated industry of super fighters, and how it corrupted her."
And I would tell you to piss off.
Yes, because you're the writer. You're allowed to tell the story. What now? That doesn't mean people can't criticize you,
Right.
but it's like it feels like a lot of the criticism I see, and sometimes reactions even I admit I have to stories is, here, have some nice chocolate chip cookies. Should have been a cake. You had all the ingredients there for a nice cake. You just had to just have to sift the flour some more and add something to thicken it. But I wanted to make chocolate chip cookies. It should have been a cake, damn it.
uh yeah, and yeah, it's that's very easy to do when when you've got a story like where you have elements that people might find more interesting than others, and or you read about a movie, and or something like that, and you find out what the original plot of it was, and you're like, oh, why didn't they do that? um you
Oh
know
yeah, like behind the scenes, it's like, ah, dang it.
yeah,
That plot sounds much better.
yeah, like the aforementioned movie I just kind of briefly mentioned, Star Trek Insurrection. The original story of that movie was actually more like it was kind of like uh Heart of Darkness Apocalypse Now type of story to it, where Picard had to go after a rogue Starfleet captain, and it's centered on the fountain, the planet with the fountain of youth was just kind of like a just kind of like you know not really a big element to the story, and the plot more revolved around this captain, and I think the Romulans were part of it too. And then yeah, and I heard that and I thought, God, that sounds like a much better movie than what we got.
Yeah. I think I heard about that where it's like they were told, oh, it's too dark.
Yeah, it's like, come on. And then we got this. Okay. I will say, like with First Contact, when I was talking about with the humor, because that it worked. I think what happened was, and then this happened in the MCU too, where the next movie, like with Insurrection, that you had too much humor in that movie, and I blame
Worf developing breasts.
no, well, no, he had a pimple.
Well, he had pimple, but it's like gynecomastia is common during Klingon puberty.
Did he get gynecomastia? No, no, it was his hair grew long.
You've blocked it out of your memory. It definitely happened.
Well, I remember Crusher and Troy talking about their boobs. I don't remember Worf having developing gynecomastia though. No,
I,
you're right. I don't remember that.
at least I'm pretty sure that's there. Maybe I just imagined it, but man, I really hope I didn't imagine that. What would that say about my subconscious? Maybe
Yeah.
somebody needs to rewrite me.
But well, yeah, and yeah, they turned Worf, the proud Klingon warrior, and he was a butt of every joke in that movie. Like,
Yeah, it's interesting, and
yeah,
uh,
and yeah,
also, can I
and
just say, like, it seems like the Romulans are just always at the key of a lot of things that just get canceled.
I know
Uh,
they're a much more intriguing species, and than I think a lot of people working at Star Trek give them credit for. Especially back in the 90s and 2000s, like when they were on Next Generation. Like, I thought they were perfect antagonists, and but they kept having to bring in the freaking Klingons.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the problem you run into is where, like, my mom could tell you what the Klingons are from Star Trek,
Hmm.
most likely. If I was like, what are the Romulans from? She'd probably just be a little like, huh?
Mm.
And like if you're a suit trying, there's one thing to have an episode about the Romulans. It's like, yeah, we make 20 of those a year. Just go nuts, kids.
Hmm.
But a movie, it's like you gotta get a lot of funding together to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so you gotta be like, okay, what's the most crowd pleasing thing we can imagine? I've got it. They go back in time to the 80s and save a whale.
Yeah, and it worked. Yeah.
I think that was the highest grossing Star Trek movie up until they started the J.J. Abrams reboots.
I believe you're right. Yeah, actually, I think it still is after you adjust for inflation.
Would not surprise me.
Yeah.
That's a crowd pleaser. Oh, they're
Yeah.
saving a whale and there's funny modern references.
Yeah.
Sold.
Yeah. And they almost had Eddie Murphy in that movie.
What would he have been?
He was going to play like an alien conspiracy theorist type guy who's into UFOs, and then he accidentally sees the bird of prey.
Oh, that would have been good.
Yeah, but
Might have required too much focus.
yeah, and probably would have been too much. They would have had to have paid him a lot of money because he was really popular back then.
And that was like his SNL days and stand-up comedy. And
Yeah, and I think he had just done Beverly Hills Cop.
okay, so
So
definitely probably too
yeah,
expensive.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's I understand it. Yeah, it's just it's just like it's like that Simpsons joke with Star Trek 12, so very very tired. like
Eh,
like
eh,
Klingons approaching again with the Klingons.
I'll have some variety.
Yeah.
Uh, and I notice how like a lot of where we're bringing things up isn't so much original stories. Like Zeta Family, I got over myself.
Mhm.
Like, is every joke perfect? No. Is it kind of tiresome how it seems like every comedy is like, haha, everybody is bad at what they do?
Yeah.
Like, it gets tiring after a while, after you've seen it in enough shows.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say too, like you know, when you watch it with one show, it gets old after about 3 or 4 years. That's what happened to me with The Office. Like, after about 4 years, I'm like, "Oh, okay, the joke is wearing thin. I'm out."
Yeah. And then you've also got, Parks and Rec. That was good, but I could never, like, I started the encore season. I was like, you skipped 5 years. I think I'm good with the ending I had there.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was always more of a Parks guy than an Office guy, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't take issue with the Zeta family being what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
It is very much a style that it knows what it wants. I can take it or leave it, especially since it was free. So I don't really have a position to complain.
Yeah.
Um, on the other hand, if the Zeta family was, I don't know, well, I think I kind of mentioned this already, but yeah, if that it's different if you have an expectation. Like
Hmm.
I went in because my dad said, "Oh, you should listen to this," and I had no idea what it was. But I was like, "Oh, an investigator
Yeah.
uh, infiltrating a dangerous cult in the countryside." Why is the first scene all about her best friend talking about her breakup and being very needy? That's like yeah, this woman is calling in because it's like oh so I'm gonna deliver you a voicemail every 24 hours with my updates, and I need you to transcribe them for me so I have my notes when I get home. And you so when are you gonna ask how I'm doing? How are you doing? I'm fine. Okay, great. So anyways, about to infiltrate this dangerous cult. Uh, uh, can't you tell from my tone that I'm not actually fine? Huh? You've never been you're always so selfish. You never think about me. You're supposed to tease it out of me. It's like I'm making it sound funnier than it actually is. But
Yeah.
I was just annoyed by it. But again, that was just like me having to reorient myself around. Okay, here's what the story is actually about.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of quirky comedies, I know you finally gotten around to watching Only Murders in the Building,
Hmm.
and I think you kind of had a mixed response to it, if I recall.
Right, and it's kind of the same thing. It isn't nearly as extreme as The Office or Zeta Family, but it is still kind of that. Okay, everyone's kind of bad at what they do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You had Steve Martin, who's a just a washed up actor from a cop show, and then can't yeah has struggling to get roles, and then you had Martin Short, who was a failed theater director, and
Splash the musical.
Splash. What was the weekend at what was it
It was like
weekend at Maury's.
that's right. It was like the double adaptation of Weekend at Bernie's and
Bernie's
Tuesdays at
and Tuesdays
Moore's.
with Maury.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's but that's another thing is it was it's a that show is a murder mystery comedy.
hmm
It's it's got you've got two legendary comedians, and then they're stuck in a murder mystery. It's that show it kind of I would say that show had me hooked from the first episode. I will say, like, this seems to happen with every comedy I've noticed, like going back decades, is it starts getting really silly at the end.
yeah. Like that last episode when the murderer was kind of way too happy about admitting the murder,
Hmm.
and they seemed like a kind of a caricature of like of what a psycho killer would be like. I
Yeah,
I am phrasing it vaguely to avoid spoilers, but
yeah, yeah,
uh, it's like okay, you can stop bragging now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's but that's another one, again, like, and I guess to try to wrap it wrap this up, we it's one thing to kind of, like, it's one thing to have expectations, but it's another thing to just say, well, no, that story, I didn't like the way that story was done. It needs to be done the way I want it to be done. And it's like, well, that's very and I'll use this word. It's very disrespectful to the person who created the story and put a lot of time and a lot of effort into creating it.
Right. And again, there's like a limit to this. Like for example, taking only murders in the building at its face value. Like, okay, this is a comedy more than it is a murder mystery. Yes, it's going to occasionally have gory, violent, tense bits,
Hmm.
but it's still at the end of the day trying to be funny 75% of the time.
Hmm.
Although I think the best episode was the one from the perspective of the deaf kid, which was, man, I was talking with my sister about it, and she was right. Somebody deserves to earn an Emmy for sound mixing for that episode
Oh yeah,
because
yeah,
they did this excellent job of kind of muffling everything just the right way. It's like he can't actually make anything out,
right.
but like you as the audience can kind of tell what's going on thanks to some subtitles and context and things.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of a lot of body language and
Yep.
of course I think you even saw some text messaging on the screen and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I would say that was the best one of the series, but it's also the most serious one of the series.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's like, okay, so maybe I wanted something a little bit less goofy, a little bit more serious. So that's like, okay, that's a me expectation. A them explanation would be, okay, that joke didn't land, that joke didn't land, that joke didn't land, that joke landed, that joke didn't land. Yeah, like I can you can still criticize, uh, you can still criticize things, but you kind of got to like have the right frame of reference for it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like I guess I'm kind of having an anti-Dune response, probably because I've seen so many comedic Marvel movies and uh, Office style comedies, like Archer style comedies, where everybody's just bad and awful at what they do. It's
Yeah.
like, please, can I just have some characters who are competent, please?
Yeah.
I just want to watch a story about characters who are good at something.
Yeah. And I will say, like, in the case of Dune, like, you do have some characters out there. Yeah, they are very good at what they do, and then it's but it's also it's just if you know anything about the story, you're the entire time it's you're kind of going, oh come on man, can't you see what's going on here? Or you're things are not going to go the way you think.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm just trying to make sure is like we're not like making a polemic against criticism and critics.
Hmm.
Uh, we're not doing the Teddy Roosevelt speech about how the critic's opinion doesn't count because he doesn't go in there and bleed and have troubles and everything. Like
Yeah.
that's an extreme statement. It's more just like make sure make sure that the plate of cookies isn't being judged as a cake.
Yeah. Hey Serena.
Hey hey.
Yeah. 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 And yeah, it's yeah, just yeah, like we've said, like I will say it again, taking the story for what it is and not what you want it to be, and then you know and judging it based on that.
Hmm.
I would say judge it based on what you have, what was presented in front of you, and yeah. Oh cool, Serena, that's great news.
Yep. So Serena's new comic book Black Rhapsody is going to be looks like you're going to be launching soon.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah, I'm excited for that book.
Yep. I know you've been working really hard on it for just ages.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I think that brings us to a close. We have some more time. Who in the audience has any questions?
Yes.
It can be on the topic. It can be unrelated. Just whatever has your curiosity peaked today.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat. uh, yeah.
I have a question, Daniel. What's on your shirt?
Matt's El Rancho. It's a Mexican food restaurant, famous Mexican food restaurant in Austin, Texas. Used to go eat there all the time with my mom and dad
Okay.
when we were living there, and I miss it terribly because it was probably some of the best Mexican food I've ever had in my life. It's,
Yeah, that's a phenomenon that like just doesn't really exist where I'm at. Is having like collectibles for your restaurant.
yeah, I will say that's one of the things that they did in Austin very well. Like a lot of the restaurants in Austin did very well because Austin's kind of a it is kind of a tourist town,
Hmm.
so you kind of have
Oh,
that feel
gotcha.
to it. Yeah. Okay. So it's the mailing
Okay,
list. Yeah. Okay.
but still, that's an important milestone.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. it's yeah, and Serena, if you ever feel like it, the door is open for you to come on here and talk about your book.
Hmm.
We'd be happy to have you on.
Yep.
Yeah,
So, any
trying to think.
discussion questions?
Yeah,
Ch- Changus, Creators Outlet,
anybody, anyone,
Bueller.
Bueller. uh, uh,
Well, if that's not the case, if you don't have any questions,
yeah.
so what are you consuming this week?
So this week I'm actually I'm finally getting around to watching Ted Lasso.
I keep hearing about that.
Yeah, my parents actually
Mine
started
too.
watching it. Yeah, they started watching it, and they're like, "Oh, it's hilarious! You need to watch it. It's really funny." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Oh yeah, no,
Well,
oh
shoot,
yeah, no, yeah,
we're
yeah,
just
no
a
problem.
small,
Sorry.
intimate group of friends here, so
Yeah,
it wouldn't be bad.
yeah. I mean, we will keep it very casual. Yeah,
Yep. Uh, we'll save the hard hitting questions for the second podcast. Where are the bodies?
yeah,
But let's hear. So this last week when I was doing heavy editing, I had Bob's Burgers on the background the whole time because I needed something kind of mindless that I could half watch while I waited for boy
hmm
Ki- boy Kindle. Kindle desktop publishing is kind of tricky. I went through and fixed some typos in my old books, and making a Scrivener export them to the right size for the old book covers ended up being a bigger hassle than I thought.
yeah.
Because I had fixed some spacing, which meant that book two was too short. So I added some acknowledgments and notes to it, and it was just took 3 nights out of the week.
Oof.
So before I got it sorted, which
Mm.
it's done.
Mm.
So now, if you buy a copy of book two, chapter 12 isn't mysteriously double tabbed when the
Yeah.
rest of the book isn't.
Oh, I meant to look for my Kindle. I think it's in one of my bags somewhere. I hope I didn't lose it, and it didn't get lost in the move.
Well, if you lost your Kindle, this is the time of year when they're going to start having really heavy discounts on them.
Yeah,
Uh, and they always have those Kindle tablets for like $50.
yeah, that's true. Uh,
Uh,
so when should you launch a mailing list? A good time to I mean, whenever. I mean, I would say, like, I launched my mailing list right around this time last year.
yeah, I can't say that there would be a bad time to launch it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, yeah, with a mailing list, I mean, it's, I would say launch it, whenever you want,
Yep, because
really.
the mailing list isn't the campaign itself. The mailing list is, hey, you see these cool pictures that I keep posting on Twitter, which you have really cool pictures to post on Twitter.
Hmm.
Like, your artist is amazing,
Yeah,
uh, and your character concepts are really popping in there. So yeah, if you have a mailing list, you know, go ahead. I would just say pull the trigger now.
yeah, I would too. Yeah, if you've got it ready to go, I'd say do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Because the mailing list itself doesn't require a lot of fanfare. It's just you have something that has a link that comes in every week, right? Or that we have a link that you just share around and people go, oh, yeah, I might be interested in that.
yeah, and people just, yeah, they type in their email address, and once you launch the book, and then you send out a mass email to all of them, and
Yeah. And then
yeah,
they get notified.
yeah,
Uh, I'd say like the mailing list is one of the better things you can have in your back pocket.
yeah,
I'm actually still trying to get any sort of real subscription base on my Subscribe not Subscribe
yeah.
Star, excuse me,
Substack.
Substack. Thank you.
Yeah,
Subscribe Star is the alternative to Patreon.
right.
Well, although Patreon itself is actually working out pretty nicely for me.
Oh, that's good.
I have not been canceled yet, despite all assurances that I would be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's. I think it's only a matter of time before both of us and end up on the cancellation block, which I would call that I would consider that a badge of honor at this point.
I mean, here's the thing about cancellation that I've kind of realized is that, like, outside of a couple of little jokes here and there, I'm actually pretty chill on my Twitter and other accounts.
Yeah.
Like, if you just look over my Twitter, what do? I occasionally will comment on a TV show I've watched. I'll post show links for my writings. I'll say nice things to people who I see. I'll say, "Hey, that looks really nice," or like, just, "Oh, hey, that's really cool." It's like, do they have to know anything about my opinions or politics? No. Just be generally pleasant and do what people have been telling Dan Slott to do for years. separate out your politics Twitter or I don't even really have a politics Twitter. I just have a fun Twitter and a work Twitter.
Yeah.
And the work Twitter has gotten slightly more fun over time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, if you're pretty non-threatening, although, in my case, I've probably tweeted a couple of things in the last year and a half that will probably might get me in a little bit of a sticky spot, but I mean,
yeah, and then there is the fact that the problem with being generically pleasant is that you don't really stand for anything.
Right.
Like nobody has like, oh, yeah, a DB Fastbinder hot take. Let's see what he has to say. My book is out.
Yeah.
That is a really nice cover for your book.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Richard Meyer's take on what's his name? Actor who played Picard.
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart. Thanks. I couldn't think of his first name. Patrick Stewart's Twitter, where it's like, wow, this is like the internal monologue of a golden retriever if you learned how to type.
Oh. Oh man! Oh, poor Patrick.
Yeah, because he's not a very smart man. He's just good at sounding smart. There's my hot take, which I borrowed from somebody else. So there you see. I'm not. I'm not a firebrand online. And Miss Rena, I'm not gonna read what you said there, but yeah, it's like Michael Jordan said: Republicans buy shoes too.
Yeah.
If he actually said it. If he didn't say it, the sentiment is still true.
Yeah.
It works always.
Yeah, I think he said something along those lines. Yeah. But the sentiment is very true. Yeah, you don't want to anger too many people. But yeah, it's if unless anyone has any other questions, I guess we could probably take this to a close.
Yep. All right. Going once. Going twice. Changus, I'm afraid you're canceled for agreeing with me.
Yes.
Clearly, you can't be trusted because I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, Rena, thanks for coming in.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Serena and Changus and everyone else who came in to watch us. We appreciate it. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah.
And Rena, that invitation is wide open.
Yes.
Anytime you feel like it.
Yes. All right. That's all the time we have for tonight. So good night.
Good night, everyone.